You know, over the last couple of weeks, the WA government's inquiry into short-term accommodation has been making headlines. You would have read some of those. But the Tourism Council here in Western Australia declaring that they'd like to ban all holiday homes. They've been characterised as Trojan horses, eroding local businesses' income and even destroying local communities. But we get down to the fundamental question, which is, are they really that bad? And what's been a long-standing West Australian tradition of sharing a holiday home with extended families and friends, why is it being demonised? Well, it would seem a downturn in tourism hasn't helped. Accommodation providers are struggling and looking for something or someone to blame. And large hotel chains are happy with any movement that might give them more market share. But we have to ask ourselves the question, is there any merit in what they're saying? I suppose it's like everything in life. Moderation is always going to be the key. But of course, no one wants a place to be overrun by holiday homes. That destroys the essence of the holiday destination. However, we then look at the option of banning unaffordable accommodation. Well, that's not going to increase tourism either. So what we need is a common sense approach. We're joined on the program by Amanda Walker, who's the founder at WA Homestay. And Amanda, I just realised we've run into a problem here straight away.
What's that, Chris?
Well, somebody in here mentioned common sense. And straight away I think we've got a problem, Houston. Common sense.
Listening to these government inquiries, I think you might be onto something there, Chris. To be honest, it shocked me.
Why is there so much of a stink about this sort of stuff? I'm guessing that part of the concern is people running homes on Airbnb, which I guess in that case is a disruptive technology. It is fairly new. But some of the other stuff that we've already identified, such as people sharing holiday homes and stuff like that, nothing new about that. People have been doing that for years.
Absolutely. And I think, look, people have got a bit of their knickers in the twist and there are businesses suffering out there. So, I'm not negating that there is a problem, but, dwindling tourism numbers really feeds into that. It's a bit of a coincidence that all these issues and all these registered accommodation providers are now screaming at holiday homes for stealing their share of the accommodation, when really the holiday homes have been operating for quite some time. And unfortunately, the figures aren't great at the moment, tourism-wise, and I think they're just a nice little scapegoat.
Yeah, I also wonder if people start to ask themselves the question, I mean, a lot of the accommodation that jumps up and down about this is accommodation's pretty expensive. And what we forget, and something that's been conveniently forgotten, you look at some of our popular tourism destinations. When I was a kid, our family used to traipse off to Dunsborough every summer for summer holidays. We'd be gone for 4 weeks. It was always great fun. But the one thing that stuck out to me and is most vivid in my memory of Dunsborough as a kid were this plethora of caravan parks. If you went between Dunsborough and Busselton, there were caravan parks everywhere. There wouldn't be a quarter of the caravan parks there once were, despite the fact that our population has increased significantly since that time. Now, what did caravan parks do? Well, apart from anything else, they provided what was essentially cheap accommodation. Well, that accommodation has disappeared, and to a large extent it's been replaced by so-called resort accommodation. Well, I'll put it to you, Amanda, the people who could afford and who went for the regular caravan holiday are not people who could afford a resort holiday, because a resort holiday is vastly more expensive. And somewhere along the line, somebody must have lost sight and said, hang on a second, how do we continue to maintain holidays that people can afford? I mean, if you can afford a resort holiday, good, great, go and have one. But there's a significant part of the population that can't. But that part of the population, 40 years ago, were going to caravan parks and they could afford the holiday.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. I think you make a really valid point. And there's a lot of people on either side pointing the finger. So you've got the Tourism Council of WA, who seems to be nestled quite nicely in the same vein as AHA's proposals. And they're saying, people that stay in holiday homes don't spend as much money as people who spend time in other accommodations. And then you've got Airbnb coming back saying, no, people that spend time in holiday homes, they're the ones that spend more. But in reality, to be frank, who cares? It's tourism dollars going down there. And as you said, holiday homes open it up for a range of people that may not be able to afford it otherwise. And whether they spend as much as people staying in hotels or not as much, they are still genuine tourists to the area. And a lot of the times, as you said, has been a rite of passage for them. And if they go, their children will go, their grandchildren might go. So it's this longevity of creating traditions. And I think, both sides have got their stats about who spends more. But in the end, people are visiting the area, and that's what counts.
Oh, it certainly is. But also, why do we sit there and talk about how much people are spending? Can I dispense some advice to people in tourism? Firstly, it's getting people to go to places. Right, that's the first step. The second step is once you've got them there, don't rip them off. And I'm sorry that some of our better-known holiday destinations got a bad habit of being horrendously expensive. And at some point, Australia's actually going to have to wake up and smell the cost. It's the same reason that local people go to Bali instead of going down south for a holiday, because they can have a luxurious holiday in Bali for a fraction of the cost. So, and okay, granted, we don't have the same sort of working conditions that the average Balinese worker has, and I understand that. But what we also have to understand is when somebody can sit in a plane for not much longer than it would take them to go to some of our holiday destinations down south, somewhere along the line somebody has to wake up and smell the coffee, don't they?
I would have thought so. And look, I don't hold myself out to be, an economics expert or necessarily even a tourism expert. But again, going back to common sense, you would think limiting accommodation options are not going to attract more tourists. I would have thought giving tourists a range of accommodation options and letting them make the choice is the better way to go.
Why are so many people so opposed to competition? Once again, I'll go back to the argument of when you talk about this cheaper accommodation versus, let's say, resort-style accommodation. If you are the kind of person who wants resort-style accommodation, you're not going to go and do an Airbnb from somebody's home, right?
No.
Not unless their home happens to be in Eagle Bay and worth about $10 million. And I'm guessing chances are they're not doing Airbnb. But looking at it realistically, you're not going to affect... I mean, it's a bit like complaining that you've got too many car dealers. But the car dealer that comes in and complains about it's the BMW dealer, and he complains about somebody coming in to sell Hyundais. Well, how many people who are potential customers of Hyundais are liable to be a threat to BMW? Well, the short answer is nothing. Why? Because they're two separate and distinctive markets. And the same applies in this case, surely.
Well, I would think so, and that's my gut feel. However, look, there is some concerns about what they're calling the Venice effect, where, the short-term rental market becomes so lucrative that all of the homes hop over to short-term rental rather than providing long-term rental and, other accommodation options for locals to live in that area. And no one wants that, because that then, as they rightly point out, destroys the essence of the place. You lose that local flavour. But then you've got the city of Busselton, the Shire of Margaret River, and they are very on the front foot in relation to registering holiday homes, and are now actively making sure people are complying with that. And they have the ability and the foresight to say, well, okay, that's now reached saturation point. Perhaps we don't allow any more holiday homes into that area. I think the powers that be are wanting to take the decision into a blanket ban when it can be regulated on a more common sense level.
Well, how's a blanket ban supposed to work anyway? Whatever happened to the fact that we're living in a free enterprise society? And let's be honest, a lot of the places of which we speak, they are reliant on tourism. See, people like the city of Busselton and the Shire of Augusta, Margaret River, they know that tourism is their lifeblood, right? So their whole towns basically, with the exception of a couple of minor industries, their whole town centres around tourism, and they have grown on the back of tourism. And so therefore, logically, you would do anything to encourage tourism because that's how the local economy benefits.
Absolutely. And look, they had a member from Tasmania, from the Tourism Council, and Tasmania's had something like 40% tourism growth over the last 5 years, huge numbers. And what they've seen was they didn't have enough traditional accommodation to house all these guests. And so holiday homes stepped up. Now, they do have the issue now where affordability in Hobart has gotten out of hand. And so probably they didn't have as good a hold as they should. But had they not had the holiday homes there, they would have had to turn away tourists, and that's not good for anyone.
No, of course it's not. Well, it's crazy, isn't it? It's a self-defeating exercise. Where do you think you're going to go with this? Because unfortunately, as with all inquiries, somebody becomes a fall guy. Somebody becomes the inevitable scapegoat because after you've had an inquiry, somehow somebody wants to appear to be doing something.
Yeah, I would really like to see them just say, okay, holiday homes are an integral part of the tourism industry. They provide an affordable option for families and large groups. But how can we try and circumnavigate some of these negative points? And I think a register, whether it be statewide or local council, is a good way to go. But their key issue is how to enforce compliance on that, because the local governments, some of them much smaller than the city of Busselton, just don't have the manpower to actively enforce it. So that is probably a question for the state government and how they're going to support the local governments in ensuring that if you are going to operate as a holiday home, register so the council can ensure you tick the boxes in relation to general safety, parking, amenities and stuff like that. But don't let the dream of the holiday home disappear.
Has anyone ever done any surveys to establish how many people who go to this holiday type of accommodation of which we speak would not be able to take holidays in these areas if that kind of accommodation wasn't available?
Well, it depends on what side you're on. So the Tourism Council of WA told the submission that everyone that wants to travel will travel. They'll find a way to get there anyway. I would like to beg to differ. I have a young family and I know what it's like trying to keep them quiet in hotel rooms. And to be honest, it's just not enjoyable for anyone. They need the room to run and play. So my viewpoint is that they simply just wouldn't go.
Yeah, and also, who could afford to take a family to a lot of hotel rooms unless you want to stay at the Roach Hotel, and nobody wants to stay there?
Absolutely, because you're needing 2 adjoining rooms, and my little ones are too young to put in the other room at this stage. So we're left in a bit of a pickle.
Yeah. So has anybody ever, maybe I should rephrase that last question and say, has anybody ever objectively, using hard facts, looked at this and said, okay, let's realistically ask the question. If you couldn't go and stay in this short-term accommodation, could you afford the alternative accommodation? Because it seems to me that what we've got here is a fight between vested interests. And surely at some point, and this is something we've been talking about for a long time, we use the term affordable, which is just a euphemism for saying it's too bloody expensive. And we're trying to pull it back to a price that people can afford. So why don't we call a spade here and somebody actually say, if you take this out of the equation, there's a whole raft of people who simply won't be able to afford it. And I've got to say, I think the argument, well, people will find a way, is flawed, because it comes to a point, something I'd like to drive a Maserati, but I can't because I can't afford it. It's as simple as that. You say, using the logic that you just suggested they made just a while ago, I'd be doing that anyway because that's what I want to do. No, it doesn't work that way.
Absolutely. And look, I think unfortunately to put money into this kind of inquiry or wanting to find information on this matter, you need to have a vested interest, and then the other side just claims that your figures are made up, and create their own inquiries to prove their side of things. So I think we're kind of caught in this no man's land of he said, she said, but you would think, again, I mean, neither of us are holding ourselves out to be experts necessarily, but we are people with budgets and we understand how that works. And, you can't do everything you want to do.
No, and you can't buy what you can't afford.
Well, you shouldn't anyway.
No, you can't. And if you have a family, that's absolutely the case.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And you sit there and you
it-
go, I could take the family to Bali for X number of dollars. I go for a holiday down south, going to cost me Y number of dollars. And so the next thing you do is turn around and say, hey, kids, how'd you like to go on a plane?
Yeah, absolutely. And even like the wedding industry down there, people choose to do weddings down there. Beautiful venues, amazing location. But a lot of guests can't afford to travel and then to stay in accommodation down there other than holiday homes. So, there's a range of things that the holiday homes are there to cater for. And I just think it'd be a real shame to see it disappear.
I think you're right. Thank you very much for having a chat to us, Amanda.
Thanks, Chris. Lovely.
Amanda Walker is from WA Homestay. And once again, I kind of have to shake my head a bit and say, let's just stop and look at this. 92211 Nice place. God's own country down south, especially our southwest. Bustleton, Margaret River, Augusta, all down through that area. Lovely part of the world. But seriously, could you afford to go and stay in a lot of the accommodation there? As I mentioned when I was having a chat to Amanda, a lot of the caravan parks, a lot of the places that people could afford to stay just simply aren't there anymore and aren't there in the numbers that they once used to be. And some of this other accommodation, I've got to say, it's great, it looks wonderful, but it all comes down to, can you afford it? And I think, to be honest, the answer in many cases is no.